Chevre, hello, how are you? I hope everyone is gesund, stark und veilig begashmis und beruchnis. I hope everyone is healthy, strong, and happy, physically and spiritually. Today we might actually discuss, and what may well turn out to be, the best advice you ever received in your life. Possibly. But first, today is Erev Shabbos Kodesh Parshas Shemos. Today, my friends, is Chof Tevis, the Yom Ha'ilul of the Rambam. And next week, in Mitzvah Shem, I think Tuesday is Chof Dalet Tevis, the Yom Ha'ilul of the Alter Rebbe. So we have to understand the connection between all these things. As usual, before we start, we'll begin with a prayer. And that is the Pasuk of Tehillim from Kapitel Kuf Lamed Vov, which says, Vayetze Yisrael mitoichom, Kiliyelom chazdei, Kiliyelom chazdei. Hashem took us out mitoichom from Egypt. Kiliyelom chazdei, forever is your kindness. So from here we could say that forever is your kindness means your kindness should continue as He took us out of Mitzrayim. Ki meitzeischo meretz Mitzrayim, arenu flois, as He took us out of Egypt, we will see wonders when Mashiach will come. But also, Kiliyelom chazdei, we needed a special level of kindness, infinite kindness, in order to achieve that feat of going out of Egypt. And this is what He gives every single Jew. And this is the story of Exodus in Yetzias Mitzrayim, that the Yid was given this power of infinity, and we connect to this power of infinity. And we have to discuss the relevance of all this. And let's go to the Parsha. And Parsha Shemos is the story in the beginning of how the Yidden are enslaved by the Egyptians. And the Pasuk says that Vayimoru es chayeyim, they embittered their lives, ba'avoda kasha, with hard labor, b'chomer bulveinim, we had to work with mortar and bricks, u'b'chol avoda b'soda, and all kinds of works in the field, is kol avodasam asher avdu b'hem beforech. All the work they subjected them to was with crushing harshness. So, we have to understand, what is the relevance for us today? What is the meaning? What do we learn from this? What are the lessons? So, to connect straight away with Alter Rebbe, in this week's masterpiece, Torah Or, the Alter Rebbe, one of his most famous Sfarim, that from his word Torah, is the sefer called Torah Or. Torah Or. So in Parsha Shemos, he starts off by explaining that what was the story of the exile. It says, Ki meitzeischa me'eretz Mitzrayim arenu flois. As I took you out of Egypt, I will show you wonders. And we say that b'chol doir v'doir chayav adam liris es atzmei kili yatzim Mitzrayim. We're supposed to see that we're going out as if we're going out of Egypt today. So in other words, this paradigm and this contrast of finding yourself in an exile and liberation exist constantly. In the general sense, in the cosmic level, like Yetzias Mitzrayim, Golus Mitzrayim, Yetzias Mitzrayim, and also the Golus that we're in now and Mashiach's coming, but also on a personal level. So the Alter Rebbe starts his mimer saying that just like the story of exile was then, so it is going to be in the future, and so it is happening to us on a personal level. What was the story of Yetzias Mitzrayim? So the Alter Rebbe says over there that Mitzrayim was the place where, and it's based on a pasuk, and that mimer the Alter Rebbe doesn't say these words, what I'm going to say, but in other maimarim and discourses that discuss what the Alter Rebbe discusses here, it uses this concept. And that's the pasuk which says, Vayetzi eschem mikur habarzel mi Mitzrayim liyas le'la'am. It says later on in Parshas Boy that, I think, Vaschanan, in Parshas Vaschanan, it says that Hashem took us out of the iron furnace, the iron crucible. Mitzrayim is called the iron crucible, to make us a nation for Him. Now, what is this thing of the iron furnace, the iron crucible? It means that we took metals and we put it into this iron crucible, and the crucible causes the metal to become distilled, to become pure and refined. So the Jewish nation had to go through some sort of process, forged in steel, forged through this iron crucible, and that made us merit to receive the Torah. So in other words, we spoke about this many times. We were just humans like every other people on the planet before Yetzias Mitzrayim and Golus Mitzrayim. Hashem wanted to make us his wife. He wanted to give us a Torah. In order for us to be able to be on a level that we could be his wife and he could set us apart and make Jews different, we had to go through this process, this refinement process, this kur habarzel, the iron crucible. And this made us worthy, merited, to be able to get the Torah from Hashem. And it's not a question of like, we merited it, like we had to go through harsh times, so then we got that. No, it's a learning process. It's like, imagine you're saying that somebody wants to go into grade 10, but right now he's in grade 4. Nothing's going to change that. You're not holding by grade 10 knowledge. So therefore, if you're in grade 4, you can't receive grade 10 knowledge. It's the same thing over here. Regular people cannot, as they are, receive a Torah and become transformed by it if there's no preparation on their part. So therefore, what Hashem had to do is, he had to put us into Egypt, we had to have this crucible of fire, and we became refined, we became elevated. It was an advanced educational program. And through that crucible of fire, Kura Basil, then we were able to receive the Torah. The Alter Rebbe says in the Maimer, in Torah, that so too is going to be concerning the Geula Mitzvah Shlema. There was one, so to speak, crucible of fire that we had to go through in order to get the Torah by Har Sinai. But then there's the Torah that Mashiach will reveal, the Pnimius Torah, the deeper revelations that are coming our way, the deeper level of revelations that are the secrets. Soydis HaTorah, Pnimius HaTorah. He says that clearly we also have to go through some sort of crucible of fire. The Golus that we're in now. And here comes the advice that I was talking about at the beginning of the video. And here comes the most important thing, which is actually quite amazing. The Alter Rebbe says, there's a Zohar that says, on the words B'chomer u'b'veinim, we could translate it to mean, we could interpret it as B'chomer do kal v'chomer u'b'veinim do libun hilchaseh. Chomer could be related to the concept of kal v'chomer, learning something, learning a easier, lenient, more lenient case from a difficult case. Whoever understands what I mean understands a certain method of learning, kal v'chomer. And then there's libun hilchaseh. Libun means to come to a clarification of law. But it means like white hot. So when you come to clarity, you're in a state of darkness, and you come to a clarity, the word mortar and bricks, chomer u'b'veinim milveinim, which is bricks, could also be clarity. So the Alter Rebbe says, and the Rebbe was very much into this, we have a choice. And it's like what the Mishnah says. To understand this, I'm going to talk about the Mishnah now, which is my personal favorite Mishnah in all of Pirkei Avos. The Mishnah says, Kol ha-mekabel olav oil Torah, ma'avira mimenu oil malchus ve'oil derech eretz. V'chol ha-perik mimenu oil Torah, noisnen olav oil malchus ve'oil derech eretz. This Mishnah, my friends, is so profound, so awesome. What the Mishnah is telling us, you could choose your own boss. You could choose your own form of tension in exile. Kol ha-mekabel olav Torah. If you take it upon yourself, the learning of Torah as a yoke, it's a burden. A burden in the sense that you will learn more than when you're just in the mood. You will learn because you're doing Hashem's will, and somebody has to carry the banner. Who's learning Torah at 12 a.m. in Melbourne, Australia? You happen to be up, but is there anybody who's carrying the banner for Torah? Kol ha-mekabel olav oil Torah means he bears this burden at all times, and he feels it, and he learns, because the Eibishter commanded him to learn Torah. So it's like a yoke, and he serves the yoke. As the Maimer Azal, Kisher la'oil, as the cow to his yoke. You see yourself as an instrument to learn Torah. That's what you are, that's what you're about. So a person who takes to learning Torah in such a way, then the other yokes, the other forces will not have power over you. I think I spoke about this once before, and if I remember correctly, the Maral says a fantastic thing over here in his Pirush. There are forces in the world. There's forces of government, there's mandates, there's forces of the military, there's taxes, call it whatever you want. That's Oil Malchus, is the force of government. V'ol Derech Eretz, the force of commerce. A man has to earn a living. So the fact is, these forces are forces. They're powers. Powers that Hashem instituted. There's government. There's commerce. And we're living in a world that these things carry weight and they have power. So the question is, how are you going to be driven crazy? How are you going to be driven crazy? Are you going to be driven crazy because you have to pay a mortgage? Because your taxes made a mistake? Because you have a boss who doesn't understand you? Or are you going to be driven crazy because you have a kasha and a toises that doesn't let you sleep at night peacefully? That is the question. What is disturbing you? What is bothering you? What is your tension? What is your trauma? Is your trauma a toises and not understanding the toises? Or a maimer chassidus? Or is your trauma that you got a $100 ticket for parking in the wrong spot? And the answer is, according to what the Mishnah says, you have this choice. And there was a farbrengen of the Rebbe, I think it was Vav Tishrei, Tov Aleph, and the Rebbe said, the einzige Weg to potter werden von der Zollus von Golos is through this shibud of B'chaymer Ubelveinem. And the Rebbe speaks about in Lekutei Sichas Chelik Aleph, Parsha Shemos. And he brings a very interesting story there, which I always remembered it one way, but this year when I read it again, it seems like the Rebbe brings a little different point. The Rebbe says that for the Rogatchover, Goyen, who was an absolutely genius, super genius, that are beyond levels of geniuses, so his hardest day was Shabbos. Why was his hardest day Shabbos? Because he couldn't jot down his ideas. So I always thought the pshat was because when someone's mind works like a popcorn machine, and there's brilliant new ideas that are coming, revelations are just, you're being flooded with new revelations. Each one is noveler or more novel than the other one. So if it's not Shabbos, you could write down just a point, latch onto it, jot it down, and then look at it later, etc. But at least you've made one point, one sentence, which allows you later to spend more time in it. So that's why during the week you could jot it down, but Shabbos, if your mind works like such a popcorn machine with brilliant ideas, genius, coming forth at such a rate constantly, what are you going to do? Over the Shabbos you had 101 new ideas that each one was greater than the next. How are you going to remember it? But there's another point the Rebbe says, and in that Sikha he says that the reason why the Rogatchover felt Shabbos was difficult for him was because during the week, if you have a debate, there's 10 ways to look at the situation. You could write down the 10 different ways. Let's say I'm just extrapolating from there. You could write down the different ways and you can come to a clarity. You can come to an achra. So it's much easier when you're in this minefield, in this darkness of all these ideas, and it's a big dilemma for you because you live for intellect, especially intellect of Torah. That's what your life is about. So during the week, you have a pen, you could put it on paper. When you put these things on paper, that itself sometimes brings the clarity. I'm sure you remember yourselves when you had a question, you went to a teacher. So if the student says, so when the teacher says, what don't you understand? Teacher says, the student says, everything. I don't know. What are you saying? The teacher gives up. Forget it. Sometimes the teacher will say, write down what your question is. Because when you write it down, sometimes you get to the answer just from writing it down. You know, or if you don't get the answer, it's a side point, getting back to the analogy of a teacher, but then the question's clear, you know exactly what's bothering you. If you say you don't know everything, that means you really didn't try in the first place, and you're never going to get a proper answer. But the way to get back to the Sikha, what the Rebbe says about the Rogatchover, was that without being able to write it down, there's pain involved. The pain of not being able to come to clarity, it's so much harder because you can't write down anything on Shabbos. And that's what the Rebbe uses as an example of what it means. Hard work, toiling in Torah is like what the Rogatchover said about himself on Shabbos. The toil had to be much harder because he didn't have the solution of being able to write down. So now this is what the Rebbe says. And I want you to know we said this before. I'm not going to elaborate on this, but I'm saying it because I think it's an important message to hear. What the Rebbe Rashab says in Torah Sholem, brech sich, de erwe te dafen brechen, weil ob brecht the guf. Break yourselves before Hashem will have to break you, because if he's going to break you, he might have to break a person's body. Hashem yirachem zal reibish topit, never you should have toiva nirvanigla. So to make it a bit more mild, we'll say, humble yourselves before you'll have to be humbled. And hopefully, whatever way you have to be humbled will be very, very mild. In any case, but this is the message. And the Rebbe gave this message in many things. For example, he spoke about, I heard many times where he said, it says in the Pasuk, Ofar Ato, Vel Ofar Toshuv. And that's where the Baal Shem Tov wanted to be buried, precisely, even though he could have gone up into heaven. And the Rebbe said, in our generation, we could fulfill this idea of Ofar Ato, Vel Ofar Toshuv through V'nafshi Ka'ofar L'kiltiyeh. If you'll be as humble as we say in davening, my soul is like dust before all, then you won't have to literally turn into dust. If you experience this spiritual sort of dust, you'll be humble, then that will be enough. So this is a tremendous lesson, which my friends, I cannot tell you how much you should take it to heart and drill it into yourselves. It's in your hands. What's it going to be? It's your choice. Do you want to make your golus easier? Then knock yourself out over a Gemara. Knock yourself out over a Maimon Chassidus. And then you'll be able to say clearly that I did it. Da kal v'chomer, da liben hilchase. And therefore, according to what the Eibishter said, my golus has to become easier and lighter. And that's what the Rebbe said and spoke about many times. Like Lekutei Sichas Chelik Aleph this week, Shemos, and in the Sicha of Vov Tishrei Tavshem Mem Aleph. So, and this is the connection to the Rambam. The Rebbe said, mentioned this Rosh Tevis. What's the Rosh Tevis for the Rambam? Hashem says in Parshas Boi that He's going to keep us in Mitzrayim. Leman revois moivsai be'eretz Mitzrayim. Revois moivsai be'eretz Mitzrayim is Rosh Tevis Rambam. Why? Listen to this. The Rambam actually lived in Egypt. He wrote a sefer in Egypt. He is the greatest example of what does it mean. Revois moivsai be'eretz Mitzrayim. The Yidden were in Eretz Mitzrayim in order that my wonders may be multiplied. The Rambam represents a person who in him the wonders of Hashem was multiplied. Such an unbelievable person, unparalleled, that in Egypt, as a doctor, surrounded by all sorts of decadence in Egypt, like we spoke when he gave to Yosef HaTzadik. And from there comes the Sefer Rambam, one of the greatest svarim that were ever written. If not, on a certain level, you could say, next to Hashem, Moshe Rabbeinu Sefer, Torah Tzivilonu Moshe, Torah's Moshe Avdi, which is really Hashem Sefer. We say there's the Rambam, Mishnah Torah, Mi Moshe ad Moshe, Likom ke Moshe, and now think that this came from Mitzrayim. The man voice Moivsai Beretz Mitzrayim. That it's the Rambam who teaches us how in adverse circumstances, instead of going through so much difficulties, he switched, he traded, and he decided that he'll toil, immerse himself in a Mishnah, in a Gemara, in Kol HaTorah Kula. And through that he was able to achieve the greatest achievements known to any Yid. From the Rabbeim, there are many stories of Haravanya toiling. Just about the Rebbe Rashab, We know it says that he toiled while he was involved in this most famous Hemshech, Tofei Shayim Beis. He said that at the heart of it, he had to toil in the writings of the Mittel Rebbe, the second Lubavitcher Rebbe. His great-grandfather wrote a very deeply Hasidic work called Imre Bina, and the Rebbe Rashab said about it that he heard of it so much that till the heart is gekrochen from cup, his hair fell out of his head, so to speak. There's another famous story with the Rebbe Rashab also, that once he toiled very, very long, for a very long time, and he felt like, okay, that's it, he's going to have to ask his father Pshat. And the Rebbe Marash, who was the fourth Lubavitcher Rebbe, he went to the Rebbe Marash and he asked him his question. So you can imagine what kind of deep question it is if it's one child of a Rebbe asking his father. And the Rebbe Rashab told him the words, "Was monst du bei mir, Mann bei sich?" Why are you demanding from me? Demand from yourself. And over there also, the Friedrich Rebbe says over the story for pages how his father felt after he heard that answer from his father, and how it demanded from himself to dig so much deeper to try to come up with the answer himself. But I'm just giving you examples of we in Judaism, ironically, is the only realm where the toil of Torah, haraving in Torah, is an end in itself. Like we say, Heima Melim, Veina Makablim Schar, Ono Amelim, Makablim Schar. That's another whole discussion, where only in Judaism is there an idea that it's not about success, it's not measured in terms of achievements, but it's measured in terms of effort, haravanya. And this is the message for today. Maybe we should talk about this more often on other occasions. Never, 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 never underestimate the concept of efforts. And this is what we're talking about. In the Goyish world, there's an expression. They say in English, don't sweat the small stuff, which is a good expression. When they say don't sweat the small stuff, they mean to say don't get excited, don't lose your head because you woke up this morning and broke your glasses, or you couldn't find your keys, or the kids are all crying and there's a fight who should sit where at the table, etc., etc. So we say don't sweat the small stuff. But in the context of today's word, we're saying sweat the small stuff. Maybe it's not small, but we mean to say sweat the Tosfos, sweat the Maimer, sweat the Torah. And when you sweat it, you're exchanging that sweat from the sweat you'd have to have of manual labor, from the sweat of being a construction worker, from other sort of sweats, from sweats of worrying about the mortgage, like we said before. And actually, when the Rebbe spoke about it by the Farbrengen of Vav Tishrei Tavshin Aleph, he mentioned the famous Arizal, that the Arizal said that it was through his sweating and his learning that he accomplished great things. So the Arizal also made a very big deal about this sweat. My friends, have a good sweat in learning Torah and in davening. And that is guaranteed to help us. And that's the message concerning our goals today, that through the inyan of sweating, it'll become much easier. Amen. That should be your only tension. So the Eibusher should help that we should see it. First of all, Mashiach should come the second without any work on our part. But until Mashiach comes, the bracha is sweat in your learning a Torah, and the schus of this sweating, Mashiach should come, begula mitzvah shleima, take it from Yad Mamish. Posting from my home in Melbourne, Be'ez Hashem Yisbarach, your man in Melbourne.